and welcome to the Whitaker & Company Weekly Leadership Call, June 17th, 2020 edition. I want to share with you two items today. One is the newly signed Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. That's a tongue twister right there. That was signed into law on June 5th by President Trump, and that was the culmination of a few weeks back and forth between our Senate and House of cleaning up some of the open items or some of the inflexibility of the PPP plan. And I think I've been sharing that with you guys over the last couple of weeks that we could expect some changes there. And then secondly, I want to talk about the Main Street Lending Program and how that has been, I guess I would say, changed or expanded. So now jumping into the PPP FA, or the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act, there's two components we're going to talk about today. The payroll tax deferral is the first one. This is something that we have had many clients not take advantage of because the program was not beneficial if you took advantage of it. So what the payroll tax deferral portion does is it allows employers to defer paying the employer portion of Social Security taxes through the end of 2020. So the employer portion, which should be about 6.2% of your payroll tax, of your payroll, that can be deferred through the end of 2020. And again, that's a deferral. It's a tax-free loan from the government, but it is not a credit, or it's not something that you will end up paying it back in the future. And the deferral period is 2 years. So you'll defer half of it until December 31st, 2021, and the second half until December 31st, 2022. So if you take advantage of this payroll deferral, and let's say you're able to defer, I don't know, $100,000 in Social Security taxes that you don't need to pay, 50,000 of that will be due at the end of 21, and the other 50,000 will be due at the end of 2022. So the way this originally worked is if you took the deferral program, you could not also get loan forgiveness under the PPP. And that is what was changed with the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act, is you are now allowed to utilize both of those tools, meaning the PPP monies and the deferral. So that is good news on that. The next are the non-tax provisions of the PPPFA, and this is really where I think the meat and the potatoes are. So if we go back to the original rules, and I'll compare the original rules to the new rules. Originally, when you received the PPP monies, you had 8 weeks from the time that you received the money or the monies were available to you. You had 8 weeks to spend that. That has now been extended to 24 weeks. Again, the 8 weeks has been extended to 24 weeks. It's important to note that you don't have to utilize the 24-week period. If you want to utilize the 8-week period, you can still utilize the 8-week period. So you don't have to go to the 24 weeks. You would still need to submit for loan forgiveness with your bank or with your SBA lender. Next is the threshold. As you may recall, we had 75% had to be spent on payroll-related items, and the 25% or up to 25% could be on overhead items, non-payroll related items, specific non-payroll items. That threshold has changed, and it's now 60-40. So you only need to spend 60% on payroll-related, and the other 40% can be spent on the other items that we had talked about. It was mortgage payments, rent, utilities, etc. So if you have questions on that, let us know. The next is on restoring jobs. Under the original provisions of the Act, you had until June 30th to restore your full-time equivalents. That has now been also pushed out to December 31st. There were many businesses that could not get to that threshold. Restaurants, entertainment, travel-related businesses could not get back to that number because they can't open their businesses back up. So that also has been extended out to December 31st. There's also a full-time equivalency factor that is part of the calculation for how much of the loan is forgiven. And as you may recall, you had to keep the same number of full-time equivalents. And that has now been updated to provide a little bit more flexibility. That full-time equivalent number could possibly be reduced if you cannot find qualified employees to hire, and or you can't restore your business to the same level it was before COVID-19. So let's say you were a restaurant and you had 100 employees full-time. You can't get back to 100 right now, but you can get back to 90 because that gets your business back to where you can get it. There are provisions in here that your full-time equivalency reduction factor can be reduced. Next is the loan payback period. So for any new loans, there are still monies available. The terms are extended from being payable over 2 years to being payable over 5 years. So those are the non-tax provisions of the PPPFA. Next, we'll go into the Main Street Lending Program. So the Main Street Lending Program is something that we have not had a lot of clients apply for. Partially is the banks haven't really known what to do with it. I've talked to several bankers that this wasn't even on their radar screen. And the Main Street Lending Program was really set up for larger employers, larger businesses that were too big to take advantage of the PPP money. And originally under the Main Street Lending Program, the minimum amount of loan was $500,000. That has now been reduced down to $250,000. So it expands the availability of the money to smaller businesses. This is a loan that you apply for directly through your SBA lender, so probably your bank or wherever you received or wherever you applied for your PPP money at. The threshold for the loans, it looks like to receive a loan under this program, you pretty well need to be profitable or have positive EBITDA, which for our client base, it's just about every client. So as long as you had positive EBITDA going into this situation, looks like you probably would be able to look to apply for this loan. Next are the repayment terms. The repayment on the Main Street Lending Program is such that you can defer the principal payments for 2 years and the entire loan has to be paid back over 5 years. So just to recap on this program, the loan size has been reduced from $500,000 down to $250,000 to allow it to be available for a more wider range of businesses. You need to apply for the loans directly through your SBA lender. The threshold is going to be based on your EBITDA or some level of positive earnings, and your repayment terms are payable over 5 years, with principal being able to be delayed for the first 2 years. The last thing that I want to mention here is changes to the EIDL program. This was recently published, did not get in our slides, but as you may recall, the EIDL program, that was the program that most businesses applied for the $10,000 grant directly on the SBA website. The EIDL program is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, entirely handled by the SBA. I want to say about a month and a half ago, this program was scaled back only to be available to agricultural businesses. As of this week, that has been changed. It is opened back up to, looks like all businesses, and the $10,000 grant, if you have not applied for that grant, that can now be applied for. They open that back up as well. So maybe the government is kind of catching up here, not quite sure, but that would be what it looks like to me, is they're catching up and starting to get working through their backlog. So that is all we have for this week. I want to thank you guys for checking out the video. Hopefully this was very helpful to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or reach out to anyone on our team, and we will do our best to answer your questions. Thanks a lot, and I hope you guys have a good week.